Hi, this is Dan Devlin for the Detective Dan Devlin Show. Honorable people, honorable nation. Welcome to our show, again I hope. Hope everyone is having a great day. Today, we're going to continue talking about the U.S. Constitution, and hopefully you saw our program on the statement of purpose of the Constitution of the United States. You know, this is our Constitution. We are part of that group of people who use it as a guide for our behavior in the United States. And I would like to follow through and take it in chronological order about what the Constitution is about. However, as many of you know, there are things going on in the United States, particularly in New York State, that involve the Second Amendment of the Constitution. Many people I know, and I'm willing to bet people that you know, are more concerned about the Second Amendment, which they call the right to keep and bear arms, more than any other aspect of the Constitution. I, for one, think that it is extremely important. However, I'm not too thrilled about having people who only care about their right to possess firearms and care nothing else about violations of the Constitution having firearms. And you stop and you think about it, it makes sense, because why would you want your opponents to possess firearms in order to make life difficult for you when you're the one who, and your family and your friends, are having other rights infringed upon and they don't care anything about it? Rights, as I've written about, are not possible, in my opinion, whether you think they're a gift from God or whether you think they come from a federal government or a state government. Regardless of what you think about that, they're of no value if they are not mutually agreed upon and we are willing to defend those rights. What difference does it make, and I made the point before, what difference does it make if you have a right to continue to exist, to continue to live, but someone comes up who has no idea about your rights whatsoever, doesn't care one single bit about them, comes up and threatens you and is about ready to kill you? Do you think you say, well, wait a minute, you can't do that because I have a right to continue to live? Do you think they're going to say, oh, gosh, I didn't think about that. I'm not going to kill you, and I'm not going to take your property. I'm not going to harm you and your wife and your child because I've just seen the light. You have that right, and I shouldn't do this to you. Foolish, I agree, because we see it, especially in the law enforcement community, we say that all the time. So a right is a great concept, and it's great to say God gave me these rights, because it's then like people can't argue because it has to do with God. But as I pointed out before, if people don't believe in God, then do you think they're likely to say, oh, their God gave them rights, and so I'm going to recognize them? We need to start thinking about the Constitution and the Second Amendment differently than we've thought about it before. Now, I'll be the first one to say that I believe that we do have rights that come from God. But I say that thinking about it a little differently. While we can have this gift from God, if we're not willing to protect it, if we're not willing to honor it by making sure that others can be available to exercise that right, so they can be secure and benefit from that right, if we're not willing to do that, you think about it. I'm not so sure that those people deserve any rights whatsoever. It's about mutual agreement, in my opinion. And that's something that if we're going to talk about the Second Amendment and many of the other rights, we need to explain to our friends and our relatives, the people who we love and we care about, that if they don't care about these issues, if they're not willing to come to your aid when you're in trouble, should you go to theirs? From a religious standpoint, sure, you can say you're supposed to do that. But I refer to people, especially Christians, and I suggest you go in and you find out who your neighbor is, because our obligation is to, of course, to love God with our whole heart, whole mind, whole soul, whole strength, and to love our neighbor as ourselves. We simply have this concept in American society that we have the same obligations to all people. The Constitution and other laws, we have to ask ourselves, why do they exist? And you'll get varying answers. But the reality is that they exist because they're meant to protect innocent people, good people. And we know this because when someone does something bad, especially extremely bad, they burn someone's house down, what do? We have the police called. They investigate. Some judge or jury comes to some conclusion, and I have to be careful because I would like to say that they try to administer justice, but I know that that isn't always the goal. So they go ahead and they have this hearing or this trial, and they determine whether this person should be committed to an institution for some period of time. And oftentimes we know that penalty is very small in comparison to what they've done. And then we say, well, I guess that's the way it's supposed to go. That's the way justice happens. The Constitution recognizes that even people in power, whether they're judges, whether they're legislators, whether they're executives, they have rules to go by. And we, the people, and I'll remind you, if you don't have the courage to stand up and exercise your authority and your responsibility as one of we, the people, then again, I say you have no rights and you deserve no rights at all. Now, because we have been lulled into this time period where we haven't considered many of these things, many of us are, and I mean this in the true sense of the word, ignorant about our responsibilities. Many people know about their rights. How many of them know about their responsibilities? When it says we, the people of the United States, that means that you, as one of the people, are in charge. And we need to let the officials that we hire know that we are in charge. They are not to be making decisions for us. We'll make the decisions. And they have guidelines and rules to go by in order to do what? To do what the people want done. People say, well, this is a republic. And they think of a republic as, well, you have representatives. I remind people, I believe we're a democracy who decided we're going to run like a republic. Because anytime we choose, and I've said this about really all over the world, anytime the general population chooses to change its government, it has the power to do that. They simply need to work together for a common objective and to tell those people who are officials at the time that we are no longer doing things that way. And the Declaration of Independence even indicates that when your government gets out of hand, which is what happened, and the Revolutionary War was a result of that, is when the government starts getting out of hand, the people rise up, and at that point, people say, we're not going to allow this to happen anymore. Now, one of the reasons I'm doing this program today is because people are afraid, which is interesting in itself, but they are afraid that the New York State legislature and the governor are going to pass a bill into law that says volunteer organizations in particular, such as firefighting units, volunteer fire companies, other people, and there's a list of them, but many of these organizations use their ability to get people together to raise funds by having a firearms auction. And people either bid or they sell tickets and they have a raffle. And the end result is someone gets a ticket or a stub to go to a particular firearms dealer, and they either get to choose what they want or they can take the money if they want. But because there are certain elements within our governmental structure who believe that the problem in our society is too many firearms, doesn't matter whose hands they're in, that they're bad for society. And I'll go into what hypocrites they are in a moment. But the reality is that the people who are getting together on this particular subject of raffles, for example, for firearms, they want to try to convince a legislature that they shouldn't pass that legislation. This, in large part, is about the Second Amendment. And as you know, or should know, the Second Amendment says, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. I'm going to say that again. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. What do you not understand about that? Well, I've broken that down, and some people think that, well, it's about a militia, and other people think it's about having the right to keep and bear arms. And every once in a while, I'll get someone who says, well, it's about security. And that's exactly what it's about. It is saying that if you want to be secure, you need the tools to be able to remain secure. And you need those readily available because if you need to form a militia, you have the tools to form that militia and to repel an invasion or an unruly group of individuals who are trying to take your rights from you. But because it is about security, it is far more than just simply forming a militia. It is about the concept, and we've spoken about that. One of our recent programs was about the statement of purpose, which says, we, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States. You need to know that. This is the purpose. These are the things that are important. This is why this nation was established. And even if you didn't have a Second Amendment, you would have that statement of purpose that says, wait a minute, we're trying to establish justice. We're trying to ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense. And I can't let this opportunity go by, is we need to know who that they're doing that for, and it is ourselves and our posterity. And you know my position, our posterity is our unborn descendants, which includes all our descendants in the womb who we're allowing to be destroyed. And yet we have people fighting for their so-called right to keep and bear arms, but they don't give a dang about how many innocent Americans. Those are Americans in the womb because the Constitution recognizes them to be treated exactly as ourselves. And if you want your rights and you don't care about the fact that we're slaughtering these young individuals in the womb, you're not my friend, you're my enemy. Because I want to live by that Constitution. I like the rule of law. I want to live by laws, but I want laws to be adhered to by others, especially our officials, who are denying them and allowing this destruction. But this video really is about the Second Amendment. And so I'm going to leave that aside, but you know my position on that issue. And you should be joining me, and you can go to GodandCountryOathKeepers.org, or you can go to FundamentalHumanRights.Org, or you can go to HonorablePeopleHonorableNation.org, or you can go to ProtectOurPosterity.org, and you can personally send me an email saying that you want to be involved in this fight. Because it's more than just the Second Amendment. People say, well, we need our firearms because otherwise we'll lose our other rights. There are many ways to fight, and in a modern society, right now, those firearms are necessary for us to have for a number of reasons. But the fact of the matter is there are many ways to fight. And if you want to wait until it comes to the violence of armed conflict, then you're not one of my people. And I'll remind people, we're working on that website for God and Country Oath Keepers now, so if you can't get it, wait a little while and go back to it. Or send me a note at FundamentalHumanRights.Org or HonorablePeopleHonorableNation.org. That's a great one to go to. Look at the information there. We cannot be an honorable people, or correction, we cannot be an honorable nation if we're not honorable people. I've said it, I don't know how many times, but it's a reality. And the people who want to fight for this particular issue because they're concerned that they can't raise money because it's an easy way to do it, and if that's all you want to do, don't bother me. But if you want to fight over principles, if you want to fight for justice, for honor, so that we become a better nation, so our children and our grandchildren and our posterity for generations to come can live in freedom, then you contact me. And you can use either info or Dan at any of those websites and send me an email and make a commitment for a number of years at least to work and help produce these videos. Help us do many of the other things. Help us raise money because our opposition has a ton of money, mostly yours, that they forcibly take from you, that you're in fear of not giving them, and so you provide them what they need in order to take your rights away. You need to stop and think about that. We have the ability, we have the responsibility to take charge of this government that is ours. And if you're too cowardly to do that, then keep your mouth shut and get out of the way, and those of us who care will fight, and unfortunately, you will benefit from it. But in my opinion, you should not. So the question we need to ask is, who is in charge? And I'm telling you, and the Constitution makes a point of it, and the Declaration of Independence makes a point of it. The good and decent people of the country are responsible for what we become. The bad people should be put away. We're not acting in their interest, although we will help them become good people if they choose. But as long as they choose to infringe on other people's rights by taking their property, by injuring them, by taking their life, those people are your enemies. And your other enemies are people in legislatures and in governorships and in your town council and your mayors. If they are not working for the good people, if they are trying as the Democrats in Congress are trying to bring more people into this country who have no right whatsoever to be here, and to allow them to come in and be a burden, to receive benefits that the good and decent people of the United States have worked for years in order to provide for themselves and their descendants, their posterity. But they want to do this, and you need to understand this. Many of you already do. They want to do this because they need you to be weaker. And in order for them to achieve that position of you being weaker, they need to convince you that you should not work with others that have similar objectives. And they're doing a very, very good job. When I go and meet with people, I talk to them over the phone, there is so much division that I have to stop and think and say, is it even possible to fight effectively? If I have to, I'll fight on my own. And I do, and I have. I'll use my money. I'll use my time. I'll use my vehicles. What are the chances of success? Well, they're not non-existent. Individual people can accomplish a lot. But if we could ever work together, focusing on what we need to do, understanding that there is a bigger picture, and I suggest people look at the painting that I gave to the world in 1989, and people might think that that's ridiculous. How do you do that? But I did it because I care about all the people of the world, not only even in the United States. And it has to do with problem solving, which is something we all have to do in our lives. And if we can do it more successfully, if we can do it more wisely, more effectively, then we can actually win and make our society a better place. You know, there are many people, and I'll include many of the legislators, not just Democrats, but they know that if they can convince you not to fight, to do something else in your life, to be discouraged, they know that they can win. You need to be wiser. We need to change our tactics. We need to work together. The Second Amendment is one of those things that's very vital to the health of a nation. And yet we try to divide people. You know, minorities should know. They live in communities where there's a lot of violence normally. And because there's a lot of violence, their children, their grandchildren, their wives, themselves are subject to a stray bullet or being beaten or killed just because of so-called gang activity. Would you not want to have the ability to halt that? Having the ability, I just saw something where Harriet Tubman, look it up if you don't know who she is, but she used to carry a firearm. She was an African American, or now what they call a black woman. And of course she wasn't black, as I've spoken about before. And yet when she traveled, she knew that she had to protect herself because people didn't like her. Certain people. And so she was not afraid to do that, but imagine if she didn't. At least from some of the accounts that I've heard of, she probably wouldn't have been around to do the good things that she's accomplished at some point in her life. You may recall that I've talked about, excuse me, I got to get my numbers back here. The prosecutor who was prosecuting a firearms case, and he admitted to me that if he was being attacked, he would want someone with a firearm to come along and to save him and his family. See, the truth is evident if we'll think with the basic common sense that all of us have. I'm going to run out of time here in a little bit, so I'm going to move along, but I want to make the point that the Second Amendment, and really all the amendments, are about mutual protection. If we don't mutually agree to defend these rights, then chances are we're going to lose them. And we're on the track to losing them. We're in the process of losing them now. It takes courage to do these things. And I'll remind people in closing here that very much religious liberties, our religious right, the freedom to religion, has so much to do with this. You know that many of your fundamental religious principles are being attacked in modern American society. Our forefathers would have been horrified to see what is going on here, especially when we have the ability, we have these writings that support that this is the purpose of the Constitution and the Second Amendment. So we need to fight every way that we can. And we need to take a different tactic when it comes to trying to overcome this coup, really, on the part of legislators who think that they can tell you what to do. And the fact of the matter is, if you won't agree to bowing to them, if you stand together, there is nothing they can do. Can you imagine if you had 10,000 or even 1,000 people? And in the case of these so-called raffles, if you would get the fire companies together, if you would get the other organizations together, and on the same day hold a raffle and have guns present there. And make sure that the legislators that agree with you are part of that organization. So if anybody's going to be blamed, they're going to be part of those who are going to be blamed as well. We have to show our officials that they have limits, and those limits are identified in a Constitution that they swear to uphold. But if you don't make them do it, if you're not willing to put your little petty differences aside and work together in order to focus on what it takes in order to do it, and if that takes not giving the state one more penny of your income, if it takes taking your pistol permit and burning that thing, which is worthless because the Second Amendment is the one that says you have this right already. And no one, if you're the good person, can take it away from you. I've got to go. God bless you. Have a great day. This is Dan Devlin for the Detective Dan Devlin Show. Honorable people, honorable nation, be those honorable people. Have a good day.